All right. Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining us for today's live stream about spirit communication, our spirit's favorite subject. I've been wanting to talk about this for quite a while because I'm sure I'm not the only person, but as far as I know, I'm one of the few people who've had experience with both indirectly induced after death communication. That's a modality that was founded by Dr. Allan Botkin. We're going to talk a little bit about IADC, as it's called, and also loving heart connections, another after death communication modality that was founded by Dr. Jane Bissler, that I was trained in and I practiced for a full year, I'd say about a year. And then I'm going to talk about the modality that I now practice with Allan. So we're going to cover all those three modalities and give you kind of the pros and the cons, and pose some questions to you about, such as, why does it seem as if spirit communication is on the rise? Because I think it is, at least from my observation on social media, especially in Facebook and in my group, our groups, Soulmates in the Afterlife. There are a lot of people that join us that, not all of them, of course, but several are having contact with their loved ones through the veil, and many others want to have that contact and are joining to try to understand how they can do that. So we're going to talk all about that today, and let's just get started. So first up is Induced After Death Communication, and that book, I'm not sure when it was published, but I do know that Dr. Botkin first began having patients describing visitations in his sessions with them as a psychologist, because he was practicing something called EMDR. So let me just show you some information about him. So hold on just a second while I get you that. Okay, so here we go. We're talking topic today, after death communication. So here's Dr. Botkin and IADC, as the acronym is. And you'll see that he uses in his practice, he was using at the time something called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Now, this technique is used widely to treat PTSD especially. It's very useful for that. And people who are grieving are oftentimes suffering from PTSD. And so the patient that who had the visitation had come to him for healing for his grief, and he was using PTSD. This person was a soldier. He had witnessed a child that he had grown close to being blown up by a bomb that was detonated when the caravan of the vehicle that she was in was under attack. And so he was deeply traumatized by that, carried that with him for decades. I believe he had his own child when he returned to the States and was still very depressed, even though he had his own child, couldn't really connect with her as she grew up. And he, in his session, experienced seeing this child growing up as a young woman, knew it was her, and described seeing her, knowing it was her, being able to hug her. And she told him that she was okay, because he was carrying a lot of grief and guilt about how she had died. And he was immediately healed of his suffering after that. So Dr. Botkin, believing that this is just a one-time thing, it just happened once, he just thought, okay, well, this is interesting. But then it continued to have patients that would also have visitations. Also, we're seeing deceased loved ones spontaneously appear, communicate with them, and the patient was often, of course, healed or relieved of the bulk of their grief. So something was definitely afoot, to say the least, like what's going on. And it wasn't long before he realized something profound was happening. So Dr. Botkin did write a book titled Induced After Death Communication. You can look that up. This happened in 1995, that first session. Okay. I want you to really lock that in your mind here. Okay, 1995. And here we are in 2024, soon going into 30 years since that first incident. And there's been, I believe, an uptick in people having spontaneous after-death communications in all forms. And it doesn't have to be where you see the loved one like some of these people did. Some of them just sensed the loved one. They didn't always see them. Some of them had varying experiences. Okay, so the thing to note about IADC, that because I really want to go into it with you, is that it cannot be practiced by the client. Now, the reason I first looked at the book and read it cover to cover, which I seldom do, because Allan told me to read it. And when your husband from the spirit world says, I want you to read this book, you pay attention. If it's about after-death communication, you really pay attention. So I read it and I got to the end of it and I realized, wait, I can't learn this because I have to be a licensed healthcare professional, mental professional, right? Either, or a therapist. I could be a nurse, doctor, but somebody that's licensed, okay, in the field of medical or therapeutic psychology, etc. Couldn't be a layperson, couldn't be a paraprofessional, meaning somebody like a Reiki healer, which I am. And so I got really frustrated at the end of the book and I said, why did you have me read this book? I can't even do this and myself. And he said, look it up. So I looked it up online and lo and behold, I discovered that, of course, you have to go see the professional in person. You can't have it on the phone. You can't have it on Zoom. You see them in person. That's, I really was frustrated. I thought, okay, I can't even probably find somebody in Hawaii because the chances of somebody practicing in Hawaii were, in my view, pretty low. But I looked it up and I discovered that there was a licensed psychologist practicing it just down the road from me. Not only that, I knew her. She was a friend that I had lost touch with. And she had opened up her practice not far from where I lived. And I contacted her and initially booked a session. And I went to see her. And we sat and talked for a while. And I asked her about induced after-death communication. And she said, well, it doesn't always work. And I thought, really? And she goes, yeah, like if you still want to do this, we can, but it doesn't always work. And she wasn't actively like putting the word out there, which I thought was really interesting because my friend is a very spiritual person, very psychic, very much into crystals, psychic readings, channeling, you name it. That's how I met her. She had initially been a client. And so I thought, well, if you're not doing this and you're very open to the idea of mediumship and psychics and everything to do with the afterlife, what are the chances that the other psychologists and professionals who are licensed are practicing this actively? I know some of them are, don't get me wrong. But I also found it interesting that she didn't have anything about it on her website. And I couldn't find, at least the quick check that I did, I couldn't find other trained IADC practitioners listing it on their websites because I looked. I didn't look at everybody, obviously, but I looked. And then I heard Allan say, most of them are not going to advertise it because most of them, because they're psychologists or therapists, they don't want their other patients to think they're weird because not all of them are going to be open to the idea of the afterlife. And so if you have a conventional practice, it's something he told me, you're going to keep it in your back pocket. You're only going to pull it out and suggest to somebody if you think they're open to it. You're not going to put it on your business card. You're not going to probably put it on your Facebook ad, or if you're doing that. So I thought, well, that's a detriment, like, okay, but as far as I was concerned, I thought, well, I can't even learn this. And I thought that maybe reading the book, he would give you tips on how to do this yourself, but he claims that you cannot do this yourself, okay? The reason why I found out later when I took Loving Heart Connections, because, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is because with EMDR, the practitioner needs to re-traumatize the patient, meaning that they have to take them into a painful memory. You have to go kind of reactivate that pain and trauma in order to do the process, the IEDC process. And it wasn't fully explained, but I did understand later through Dr. Bissler of how that was problematic. In fact, she said that she had several, I'd say at least two that she told me about, or my class about when I took a training with her. She said she had two patients of Dr. Botkin's who came to her who had been re-traumatized, and actually the practitioner, I'm sorry, hold on, Alan's wanting to correct me. Says they didn't see Dr. Botkin. They saw one of his trained practitioners, but they saw some psychologist or some therapist, and that person re-traumatized them as part of the process, the IDC process, and they weren't able to make the contact through the veil as they hoped. But not only that, the trauma was not cleared. And here they were with the reactivated trauma. They didn't make contact, and they left in a worse state than they entered. Okay, so that person heard about Loving Heart Connections, about Jane, contacted her, had a session with her, and made contact, and she also processed their trauma. So I thought that was really interesting and a little bit troubling. But that is the process of EMDR, apparently. Okay, so to me, that's a little bit of a negative. It's also not something that, of course, that you can practice yourself. So if you want to make the same contact that you had in a session, you need to go back to a facilitator or practitioner, either the original one that you sought out or somebody else. And you have to go see them in person. This one patient had traveled from the UK to Malta. Okay, spent thousands of dollars to travel from UK to Malta for a session with a practitioner, and they were not successful. So there's a cost involved, travel, you can't do this yourself. Also, because he does not train anyone unless they are a licensed professional, that means that the pool of practitioners is going to be smaller, as opposed to if this was a modality that was open to be learned by anybody, for example. And one of the examples that Spirit gave me was, let's think of Reiki, right? Like Reiki as a healing modality has really flourished because there are no limits to who can learn Reiki and who can teach Reiki even. So has spread throughout the world. And literally there are thousands and thousands of people who practice it, who teach it, and therefore it's really had a positive impact. And when I heard that, I read the book, saw that, learned Loving Heart Connections, and I thought, well, these modalities are very useful, but they're limiting. They're really limiting. If the person cannot activate their own connection, then okay, they can have a great session with a practitioner and heal maybe the worst of their grief, but they certainly don't learn how to continue that communication. And it's really unclear at this time whether if IADC is even encouraging people to continue those relationships through the veil. That is one issue that I see across the board with a lot of, after death communication practitioners, including mediums, who don't believe that we should or can continue those relationships. So that's that is induced after death communication in a nutshell, basically. And let's look at Loving Heart Connections by comparison, because here there has been an improvement. Interestingly, close to around the same time that Dr. Botkin was implementing and practicing IDC. In fact, he was in the middle of writing his book. Dr. Jane Bissler started having similar situations occur with her patients, that people were having these visitations, spontaneous after-death visitations. And she heard about Dr. Botkin, reached out to him, and he basically said to her, "You'll just have to wait till I finish my book." He wouldn't help her. He didn't have anything to add to her to support her in her experience. So she just went forward believing that she's being guided by spirit to create this modality. And I'm 100% sure she was guided after having met with her, having a session with her, everything. And so she formed her own method. And it does use EMDR, similar in that way to Dr. Botkin, but it includes bilateral stimulation in the form of tapping, sounds that one hears, and eye movement. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but I believe she has trademarked her process legally so that no one can steal it. It's interesting to me that all these, I don't know, maybe if I'm not criticizing anybody, I understand. Like you create a modality and you want to lock it down and trademark it. You want anybody to take it and run with it, or heaven forbid, improve it. So you trademark it. So that's what she did. Now, the good news is when the client learns loving heart connections, they are taught how to self-induce. So at least that's an improvement. Now we have a modality that allows the practitioner teach their client how to do that themselves. And she also opened up her training to paraprofessionals, energy healers like myself and other lay people. I'm not sure if just anybody can take it. I'm pretty sure the people that were in my class, which was the first class for paraprofessionals, I think most of them were healers if they weren't psychologists or in the field of therapy. But I'm not sure if that's changed. But otherwise, you can see right there that there's a greater, flexibility in terms of who's invited to apply to take training. The challenge is, from what I have gathered when I've checked in with the progress with Loving Heart Connections, it doesn't appear that there are many trainings for the practitioners. I know in the year that I took mine, there was only 2, I think, if I believe. And in those trainings, the maximum number of people were 10. So right there, you can see that there's not going to be a huge pool of practitioners that are trained. I think in my class, only maybe a handful of people are still practicing. Of the 10 people, I think about maybe 2 of them are practicing actively, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, but most of them are not. Most of them did not go forward to practice, including myself, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. The other good thing about these sessions is they can be conducted in person, but they can also be done on Zoom. You do have to see the person, see the client or the patient, and usually only one session is needed. That's at least according to Jane, Dr. Bissler, to Jane. She says she calls it a one and done modality. In reality, I think that some people do need to come back, and they indeed do seek her out for another session. And in my observation, I think that people need more support. I'm going to talk about that further too as I go into the method that I now practice with Allan. But at least in Loving Heart Connections, the client is taught everything they need to do this themselves, and they're encouraged to do that. Okay. And she does support the idea of continuing relationships through the veil after death. So you have that. The other downside is right now, there's not really a lot of support on social media even. She had a Facebook group, but there at the time when I was participating, it wasn't active at all. She wasn't there at all. So there's really no ongoing support for most clients, not at least at the time that I was practicing it. That could have changed. So I just want to, put that out there. I'm not saying that may have all changed right now, but I think that additional support is key, because what I've experienced in working with clients, and I worked with about at least 52 people with Loving Heart Connections until I put that aside. And I've done another 50 or so in the modality that I know practiced with Allan. But what I saw was that people made contact, sometimes quite profound, very vivid. Everybody's different, but sometimes, maybe most of the time, they need more, because what you're doing in connecting through the veil is something so rare and astonishing that your limiting beliefs are going to come up. And unless you're already a rather spiritually aware person who can process that, who understands that, it's really quite normal for people to start doubting what they experienced. And if you're not practicing it all the time meaning every day, and really seeing growth in that, and you only do it sporadically, it's really easy to just put it aside and think of that as some really happy memory that you have of making contact with someone you love, and you kind of forget about it and move on with your life. Okay. I think that's really understandable, because you're talking about really changing your perception of reality here. So I think that these modalities are missing an opportunity to help people understand the true nature of existence. But then I get it. Dr. Bissler and Dr. Botkin, that's not their path. That's not their purpose. They're here offering their modalities that do work. When they do work, they work well. And it won't work for everybody, clearly. That's true for any modality. You can't have 100%. I believe the statistics that Dr. Bissler shared with our class was that, and I don't think she was biased, but Loving Heart Connections has a higher success rate than IDC. I can believe that. It seems in my experience that it was fairly easy for most of my clients to make contact. Not everybody. I'd say out of those 52, I maybe had 2 people that didn't. And usually the reason could be traced to fear, like really fear, they're really blocked, or they just couldn't deal with the way the modality is practiced, that bilateral stimulation. Some people just can't do that bilateral stimulation. Like, they find it really irritating. You have to experience it to understand what I'm talking about. But some people just can't get into it, right? So if you can't get into it and you have a lot of fear, you're blocking yourself. But if that's gone and you're open, and the other side in both of these cases, I believe the other side, and in the modality as I practice it, the other side is really in charge, not us, not Dr. Botkin, not Dr. Bissler. It's the other side, because they start to connect. We are basically holding the space. We're supporting the client to relax. That's the key. This is why people can have contact through the veil just through meditation. People are having that right now and then thinking, oh, I made it up. Because most psychologists and professionals will say, oh, well, you just imagined it. And I'm here to tell you that 90% of the time, that's not true. Because it was that easy to imagine connection, you would think everybody be doing it who's grieving. And we know that that's not the case. Our society, unfortunately, is very biased and believes that people are just hallucinating deliberately, making things up on purpose. But when I work with people, they're frustrated that they can't seem to make the contact, even if they're trying to make it up. It's not that simple. And professionals just kind of want to push it aside and say, oh, I don't know about this. This is the other, I think, the conflict that, not so much with Living Heart Connections, but with IADC, that the licensed professionals like psychologists have, because basically, if you're saying what is really happening is that people are connecting with the deceased, then you're basically saying there is an afterlife. You are basically saying we don't die. And a lot of professionals don't want to be on record with that. They're not comfortable with that. That's not scientific evidence. So it puts them in a bit of a bind. Like, are we going to call this real? Are we going to call this some therapy that appears to help them make contact, but we're not really saying they are? But if it helps people, okay, we'll let them believe they're making contact. But does the psychologist herself believe that? It's not clear. My friend did, and yet she wasn't having the success she was hoping for with IADC. So I found that really fascinating. Now, this is what I practiced with Allan, and the reason I went forward with creating our own modality wasn't because I necessarily wanted to. I was kind of forced to. Allan says my hand was forced. What he means by that was that in my Loving Heart Connection sessions, Allan was facilitating contact for our clients. And I didn't see anything wrong in that because he is a spirit, clearly. He's not in a body. And Jane was always saying that spirit facilitates these sessions, which I knew they were. I knew the other side, the loved one in spirit, guides. Okay, spirit is, we're going to define that broadly, not just the person's loved one that they're trying to connect with, but their spirit team, their guides, their angels. Spirit is spirit. Okay, it's a broad term. So she would say spirit is the one that is facilitating. And we're just holding the space. We're helping the client process it, right? Helping them understand it. And so I took her at her word. But when she heard that Allan was showing up to people in sessions, like clients would say, yeah, I saw my mom and she was with Allan and he was helping her, or whatever they saw. They were some, not everybody, but some of them were seeing Allan. And she said, I told you it's against the rules of Loving Heart Connections to practice mediumship. And I said, wait a minute, I'm not doing mediumship. I don't call myself a medium. I really don't feel I am a medium. I think we're all mediums in the sense of we can all communicate with our loved ones through the veil. But to bring through somebody else's loved one, I have a lot of respect for genuine mediums, and I haven't had training like that. And yes, sometimes spirit will come through because they'll use whoever is available to communicate with their loved one. But I wasn't facilitating mediumship. I was just really talking to the client, and then Allan would do his thing. So she told me, you need to have him stop helping. She claimed that that was mediumship. And I said, wait, I thought he was a spirit, and you said that spirit was facilitating. But she wouldn't have any of that. And so I realized that I had to stop practicing Loving Heart Connections. And moving forward, I knew that we would need a method, a way to help people get into a state of deep relaxation, because that's critical to make contact. And that's it, folks, by the way. You just need to enter a deep state of relaxation. And so the other side, I'm not saying Allan, I know it was my spirit team. They told me what affirmation to use. And I later found out this particular affirmation is used quite prominently, is quite popular for manifestation. And so I began using that. I didn't even know that particular affirmation was that significant. And with the people that we've done these sessions with, and of course it's all going to be different, because some people run with this and they practice it and really make progress. Some people, because I can't make them practice, they just set aside and they say, oh, maybe that was great, but I guess it's not for me. Whatever. Everybody's, again, it's going to vary in their experience. But there's several people who have come back and told me, oh, that affirmation, that helps me like get into that zone immediately. I use that for whenever I'm stressed. It really helps me like deal with my grief, and on and on and on. So I knew that affirmation was quite powerful. I'd used it to take myself out of an experience of post-traumatic stress when I was at the dentist chair and I had started having a panic attack and thought I was going to start screaming. And it was my guides who told me what to say. And for the record, that affirmation, which all my students are familiar with, is I am one with all that is. That's it, folks. I am one with all that is. That affirmation is powerful because you're basically saying you're one with God and all of existence, which is the highest truth. And when you say that, repeat that to yourself over and over, you will enter a state of deep relaxation because that's the truth. And you're basically telling every cell of your body, reminding it that it's God, that it's source, and therefore, if you're source, if you're all that is, nothing can really go wrong. Okay, so we have our clients repeat that affirmation, but they're also encouraged to see this communication through the veil, not only as a way for them to reunite with someone they so dearly love and want to stay connected to, but that this is also a journey of transformation and healing for them. That's really what the key is, actually. The way spirits explain it to me, it's like the relationship with our loved one is like the carrot they're dangling in front of us that we want to reach for. But the real goal is our spiritual growth, because that is the primary mission of every soul in its incarnation, is to grow. It's only in this case that the connection through the veil to someone we love is going to be the way we grow. Because in reaching for that connection, you're going to have to evolve. You're going to have to let go of your limiting beliefs. If you don't, you won't really succeed. You'll get a little bit of something. But if you want to have that ongoing connection, you really want to have this stable relationship through the veil, at some point, you're going to have to address your fears, your trauma, your limiting beliefs to raise your frequency, okay? Because that's the key. You have to raise up closer to the fifth dimension. You can't go to the fifth dimension because you're still in the body, but you can raise your frequency so that you have clearer communication. Not only that, you can have even physical contact. There are people in our academy who are having physical contact, and more will have it in the future because we're just getting started. And beliefs, by the way, are contagious. So when you hang out with people like we do in our academy, and to a lesser extent in our Facebook group, who really believe that the other side is real and that they can connect with their loved ones, guess what? You have increased incidences of this. It's just going to become more and more prevalent, and until it becomes commonplace for those people. Not for everybody, but beliefs are contagious. So you want to surround yourself with people who believe in this, assuming this is what you want. If you don't want, then it doesn't matter. Be with whoever you want to be. Okay, but you do need to work on your issues, your fears, limiting beliefs, because those are the things that lower your frequency. What happens is you're not being who you truly are when you're running belief systems that are not really yours, but belong to other people, like your parents, like society, like your friends. When you do that, then you're not being true to who you are, and your vibration is denser, it's lower. Okay, that's just physics, kind of like Allan says, spiritual physics. If you are being who all that you truly are, you are going to have access to more of your energy, your life force energy. You're going to be healthier. You're going to be happier. I don't mean your life's going to be perfect because you signed up for some challenges. That's just part of the deal. But life gets better, and you find that there are more synchronicities in your life. Things seem to flow better. All that awaits you if you want to connect through the veil to someone you love, or even a guide. Similar things, just that It's just that your loved one on the other side loves you unconditionally, yes, just like your guides, your angels do, right? But there's a personal connection. And so you feel for them this deep upswelling of love, right? Which you don't, let's admit it, you don't feel that love for your guides. You're not supposed to. You love them, but not the same as you love your mother, your sister, your husband, your partner, whoever. It's a whole different thing. So the sharing, the exchanging of that love through the veil, unconditional love, is transformative. It will heal and change you. But this is a journey that takes time, it's incremental. You're going to be tested in your beliefs. You're limiting your fears, your limiting beliefs, all that's going to surface. It's just part of it, because the love that they bring starts illuminating all the false beliefs we're holding, and they get stirred up. And if you don't clear it, then you're not going to progress. That's mainly the reason why I created our academy, and why people are making progress, and everyone's at their own pace. No one should ever compare themselves to anybody else, because that's not really useful. But when you're with others that are on the same journey, you're going to make more progress. That's just how it is. That's why in a lot of things that I do, I've always belonged to certain groups when I'm trying to learn something, because I know it facilitates my growth, and I have other people to interact with who are going through what I'm going through, and it really helps. So a big part of our program is kind of group sharing and group support. And I don't think I would have been able to actually have this relationship with Allan myself if I didn't have people around me that I could turn to on a regular basis to confirm for me, to remind me of things. This is a very challenging journey, and yet, in my view, it's the most extraordinary one. It's the life-altering one. And I can't imagine not being on this journey with Allan. Certainly beats believing he's dead and thinking that I can't talk to him or connect with him. Okay. This method is facilitated by the other side. Allan is actively involved with the partners of or loved ones, because sometimes we work with people trying to connect with, say, a parent or a child, friend, and same thing. He facilitates them on the other side, because I didn't know this, but in spirit, they vary tremendously in their ability to project themselves through the veil. They're not equally endowed in that skill. Okay, some of them have to learn. Some of them are really good at it, incredibly good at it, and can make contact, can give signs that are incredible. Others, they are a bit slower in learning this. They're all different. Okay, there's no one size fits all in any of this. So that is what we're doing. And this brings up this question of, do we really need to debate the existence of an afterlife when more and more people are having spontaneous experiences, which is what I'm seeing? Like, do we really need to debate that? Because here's the statistics. I shared this last week in another live, where 4 to 18% is the number of people that's estimated to have experienced NDEs, near-death experiences. Now, at the lowest estimate of 4%, and there's 8 billion people on the planet, that would mean 320 million people have had near-death experiences. And that's probably underreported, as most of these phenomena are. 320 million people have had experiences of the other side. It's probably higher than that. Definitely, we're talking millions of people. Okay, 53% of US adults have reported being visited by a deceased loved one, either in a dream or some other form. Maybe a meditation. Maybe they saw them sitting at the edge of their bed. Half of our population in this country, and this is a recent statistic, An analysis of 35 research studies involving over 50,000 participants by the University of North Texas concluded that 1/3 of them experienced some form of after-death communication. That is 16,700 people out of 50,000 out of these studies. And we have to keep in mind that after-death communication is likely underreported because people fear being ridiculed, disbelieved, and judged as mentally ill, much in the same way as the first people who experienced, or let's say reported, NDEs were initially judged. Some were institutionalized. I think people don't remember that many of them were institutionalized until the phenomenon was understood, as more and more people began sharing and reporting their near-death experiences. Okay, so, when are we going to just accept that this is real? When are we just going to understand that this phenomenon is growing? So what is behind the increase in after-death communication? These are just my thoughts, and I want you to share what you think. My understanding from mediums who I've heard speak is that the world has always been interacting with the other side, the spirit world, okay? And the spirits have always been trying to help us, especially during challenging times, which right now I think is probably, we're at the peak of the most challenging time on the planet, bar none. And so when that happens, spirit really comes knocking on our doors hard. We're ready for this. More people are open to the idea, young people especially, they're more open-minded. And therefore humanity is raising in its consciousness. And in doing that, we're drawing closer to the other side. And so spirit communication becomes easier. Even when people don't necessarily believe in it, it becomes easier. I have lost count of the number of times in different groups I belong to where I see somebody commenting that they had an experience and it conflicts with their belief system because maybe they're a very, hardcore Christian and they just don't believe in the, that spirit can appear and that they can have that contact. And they're just shocked when the contact is so even like physical. I know somebody who is very strongly Christian, and when her partner started to physically connect with her on a sexual level, she freaked out. Like she didn't understand this because it was against her belief system, but she couldn't deny that it was him. Okay, these kind of incidences, I suspect are increasing, but people are afraid. They think that they're going crazy. Many people come to me when they discover our book or they find our Facebook group and say, I thought I was going crazy till I read your book and you're talking about what I went through. Or I found your group and I realized, wow, there are other people having these experiences like I'm having. They're afraid to tell the people around them. Of course they're afraid. They're just going to think that they're hallucinating and think that they should go get medicated. That's what happened to my own mother when she had a psychic opening at the time that she herself was pregnant and going through stress, and she had an awakening and felt all this energy, started seeing things, hearing things, and she promptly went to a psychiatrist who medicated her and shut down her abilities. Okay. But remember, as more people experience this after-death communication, it makes it easier for others to do the same. So this is a trend that I don't think is going to end. I just think it's going to increase. Just remember that we can't change the world. We only change ourselves, our own consciousness. And when we do that, our world changes. What that means for you and I who are wanting these relationships with our loved ones through the veil is understand that we're having this experience with them and it's nobody else's business what we're doing. Who cares what mainstream thinks about it? Even though, interestingly, mainstream is actually embracing after-death communication with IADC and LHC. But still, it's not going to be spreading, I don't think, those modalities strongly, because there's only so many people that can practice it, and that therefore so many people are going to learn it, right? And with the IADC, you can't do this yourself anyway. Loving Heart Connections, yeah, if you get a session from a practitioner, you can practice it yourself. But a lot of those people that are learning it, they're not going forward and strengthening your connection through the veil. At least I haven't heard of them. Okay. So my last point was humanity will become more telepathic as part of our evolution. And that's true. That's what Spirit has told me. This is where this is kind of all leading, not just to our telepathy, but just our spiritual awakening. More people are going to really, because of these direct experiences with loved ones through the veil, they're going to understand who they really are. So yeah, then you'll become more telepathic, because it's about connecting emotionally with the other side, having that experience, having that relationship. And when that happens, a lot of things will change. Your life will change. So let me know right now we're live, so you can let me know in the chat, but also in the comments later, because not everybody will see the live chat. The live chat doesn't show on YouTube, but in the comment section, let us know if you have connection with someone through the veil. Let the world know that you're having it and what it's like for you, or what you're seeing other people experiencing, because that's important that we all share our experiences. Okay. I hope I gave you some ideas about why I believe after death communication is accessible, becoming easier, why you can experience it. And by the way, if you haven't done so already, we're teaching a master class on March 25th that you can sign up for. We haven't taken our Bridge to Heaven sessions to groups before, but I'm very optimistic that it'll be successful, because when I was practicing Loving Heart Connections, I once did a group session. And before I did it, I did ask permission of Dr. Bissler. She said, sure, go ahead. But Pam, I did this myself with my client, my patients, and it wasn't really successful. She told me that maybe one person felt they made contact. It really, in her view, it was not successful. And I said, well, I'm going to try anyway. So I did. I believe we had about 10, maybe 12 people. And they had already had a session, a Loving Heart Connection session. We're just trying to see if we could take them back into that state, or have it go deeper. And about half of them had an experience. And I told her about this, and I felt it was successful, especially compared to her success rate. So all I know is Spirit told me, let's do this in a group, because I know from experience of teaching people since, actively for about 9 years now. I know that when you work in a group, the group energy, it's stronger. And so Spirit said to me, you're going to hold the space in this group. You're going to guide people to connect with the other side. And because everyone's focused on the same thing, the group energy is going to take people further. So I'm pretty confident that it's going to be quite powerful for everybody. And not that ever can guarantee that you're going to make contact, but at least you'll be given the tools to do this on your own. And that's key. Allan and I are committed to teaching this to everyone and anyone who's interested. I have no intention, at least today as I'm talking to you, to ever trademark anything. Like, I can't trademark that affirmation. I can't trademark I'm one with all that is. I don't think I'm allowed to do that. That's the only thing that you need, and the process that we lead you through. We want everyone to have this. We want, if we can, and I know it's not possible, but if I could, I would like to eliminate grief on the planet and help everybody connect to the other side, to their loved ones, to know that they're not dead, to have communication whenever they want to. That is our mission. That is our dream. And if you share that dream with us, please subscribe to our channel. Please tell everybody you know who's grieving to check it out, because until I leave this world, I am not stopping in talking about this, in helping people make contact. I'll be doing it till the day I take my last breath, I'm sure. It's the only thing I'm focused on. And so if you want this, know that it's possible. But you've got to believe. Okay, you've got to believe. The modalities are out there. I think that's great because they've proven, Dr. Botkin and Dr. Bissler are proven that people can make contact, profound contact. They experience their loved one, they have communication, sometimes they feel them hug them, undeniable contact. Not everybody, clearly. Nothing that humans practice can be 100%, but enough people that prove that after-death communication is real, okay, that you can have that. It's all in your hands, all in your belief system, all up to you. But the way that we have seen it with clients is you gotta practice this, and you've got to understand that your limiting beliefs are going to get in the way. They're going to surface. And so what is your game plan for dealing with that? I think that is what IEDC and LHC are not addressing. They just don't know how to address that. That's all. That's what Allan just said to me. They don't know how to take people beyond that because that's not their gift. But I've been working with that for, well, Allan's saying several decades, working with helping people change their belief systems and teaching about the nature of existence. And he and I are healers. So we help through attunements, and which are basically, kind of energy transmissions, spiritual transmissions that kind of upgrade your system and all that. So we're just working from another level. And we're just here to let you know that no, nobody dies. You can communicate with them. This has even gone mainstream. And I think you're going to hear more and more about it as people feel more comfortable talking about it, sharing their story. So just a reminder, share your story here. And a reminder, join our masterclass if you haven't joined it already. If you want a session, book a session. We teach that one-on-one with people. Again, we've taught about over 55 people or so. We have more sessions, people booked already. But it's real. Experience it for yourself. Don't take somebody else's word for it. We live in a time when I believe we should all be going direct to the other side. Direct for our guidance, direct for our contact. Great. It's great to go to a medium, but in the end, that in itself isn't going to heal your grief. It's certainly not going to establish your connection with someone through the veil, because mediums, that's not their focus. They don't know how to do that, most of them. They don't even know how to do that for themselves, most of them. They don't know how to connect to their own loved ones. Again, because this comes down to your belief system and your frequency. I know it sounds hard to believe, but not all mediums have a high enough frequency that they can easily commune with the higher realms and certainly their loved ones. With loved ones, Allan's saying there can be so many other issues in the way, like issues between the two people, the partner. All that's going to serve as a bit of obstacles to direct, fluid communication. And it all can be addressed. It's not, none of that is necessarily going to doom the person from having contact, but they have to figure out how are they going to overcome that. And this is what we work with people. All right. So please like, subscribe, share, you know the drill. And if you believe in our mission, let everybody else know. We're here to help for free on YouTube until I'm gone. Until I can't sit here and talk to you folks. All right. Take care, and we'll see you next week, right? You know where we are every Saturday right here. Bye-bye.